You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are not afraid of your toughest questions, so ask away. Today I have with me Jason Dossas, who is a therapist at Therapy Utah. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Lindsay. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you? Jason, it's the first time you've been on the show, so tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Yeah, no. My name's Jason Dossas. Like you said, I'm a therapist here at Therapy Utah, and I specialize in working with unwanted sexual behavior. And I also have a huge passion for working with people going through a faith transition. We're deconstructing, reconstructing their faith. And a big reason why I'm super passionate about that is in order to have a good recovery from whatever you're recovering from, whether that be unwanted sexual behavior, anxiety, depression, like whatever you're dealing with, you have to have a relationship with a higher power. You have to be in some kind of communion with God, whatever that may be, whatever denomination, whatever background that you come from. If you don't have something of a relationship with a higher power, your journey to healing is just going to be so much more difficult. And so a big part of my work and a lot of the clients that I work with and in my own life and in my own recovery has been really cultivating this relationship with God, with my higher power. So
absolutely,
it's just so important. And so I don't think you can have, you can't parse those two parts of the work separately. They have to be together. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I want to talk about this. And we need to be having more conversations about this in this space.
I couldn't agree more. And it's something we're seeing a lot of, and people trying to figure out how to navigate this in a way that makes sense and that they can come out the other side and feel good about things, right? It's interesting that you said that about the higher power, relationship with a higher power. I could not agree more that, whether you are a spiritual person or you feel like you do, it's interesting because I remember going to school and it was not a religious school, but just a secular school. And they absolutely talked about the importance of a relationship with a higher power because it gives perspective. It gives longer than just the here and now and the crap that's going on in your life right at this moment. There's something more. And we'll talk more about that later, but I love that you brought that in. So let's launch right into our listener question and we will just get started. So here's the question. It's brief, but it's to the point. How do I navigate the feelings of guilt and fear that come with questioning or leaving my faith, especially when it feels like I'm disappointing my family? So I appreciate this question. It's to the point, it's direct, and it's specific. So what are your first initial thoughts when you hear that question?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I think something that more people than are willing to admit struggle with. The first thing that comes to mind here is I actually want to gently push back on guilt and fear there. I think it's super important to differentiate the difference between guilt and shame.
Okay, why don't you tell us?
Oftentimes for me, guilt and shame get super conflated in religious circles. They're very similar, and sometimes they can feel and they can appear emotionally as very similar things, but they're entirely different. So just off the cuff, for me, guilt is about behavior and action. Guilt will say to you that I did something bad. I made a mistake. I did something wrong, and I need to repair that. I need to fix that. I need to do better next time because I care about this person or this relationship that I've harmed in some way. So guilt for me in small doses can be a really healthy thing because it pushes us to reconcile. It pushes us to repair things. But shame on the other side is much more cloak and dagger. It's much more conniving. And for me, it's purely evil. And it's not something that I ever want to experience. However, it's something that's universal to the human experience. Every human of every background, every upbringing, every religion, every spiritual practice experiences shame in one capacity or another. So what shame is for me, shame is about your identity. Shame will say, I am bad. I am fundamentally wrong. There's something within me that is fundamentally screwed up. that's wrong. If somebody knows this one thing about me, if they knew that I struggled with this, or if I were actually thinking this way, or if I actually believed this, then they wouldn't actually love me. They wouldn't accept me. And that's a whole heck of a lot different from I did something wrong and I need to repair that. I need to make up for that versus I am fundamentally wrong. I am fundamentally a mistake. And so that those two things get super conflated in religion, and they feel the same emotionally, but they have shame has a much heavier hitting hammer on the soul than guilt does.
Nice. So when you're hearing this question, are you hearing that there's some shame there and maybe they're saying it's guilt? Because what I'm hearing you say is that shame is I'm a problem and guilt is my behavior was a problem, right? Very different the way you're hearing that. So I appreciate that you're distinguishing those two things. When you hear that question, how do I navigate feelings of guilt and fear that come with questioning or leaving my faith? Does that, are you curious? Is it shame? Are they feeling like maybe they're having a problem versus their behavior is a problem?
Yeah, I would encourage that person to ask themselves, what is this feeling of guilt and fear telling me? Is it telling me that I am doing something bad, that I'm doing something wrong? Or is it telling me that I am wrong? I am fundamentally wrong for like disappointing my family in this way. I'm leaving an empty seat in heaven with the family in this way. Or is this I'm acting out in a way? And I would ask them and invite them to kind of check and just pay attention to their internal dialogue there of what is this feeling telling you? What is the feeling that you're being left with there?
Nice. I like that. What is the feeling, and getting curious around what's going on for them around this faith transition, right? So what are some of the common emotions that you have seen that people experience during a faith transition? And why are these feelings so intense?
That's a great question. I think fear is a huge one, because when you start to question or dive deeper or kind of analyze or look back, deconstruct maybe things about your faith, that's terrifying. So fear makes so much sense. You're jumping from a world where you are given a lot of answers, where you're given boxes to tick. You're given a way to behave and to interact in the world. Institutionalized religion in the church gives you a moral template from which to live your life. And so for many people, that's super comfortable because it's easy. You have, those boxes to tick, how you're supposed to act. But when we make that jump, when you start to question that template here and there, that is so scary for so many people, myself included. So
yes, that makes perfect sense. So that all of a sudden that template and that the answers are now not what they're not generated in the same way. And that feels like so unsettling. I can hear that. So when you're talking about that, the feelings of being unsettled, would you say that also grief plays a role in a faith transition, that there's a loss? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it certainly can. I mean, if you think about it in more of some of the heavier cases where there unfortunately is like separation from family or some hard boundaries and some space has to be created there is a loss, right? You're losing the tradition that you're coming from. You're losing maybe certain members of your family or your social circle, friends. So there's absolutely a loss that has to be mourned there, because that's tough. And that is sad. It's not only sad for you, it's sad for the other people that are involved in this.
Yes, absolutely. So there is grief. I mean, I think the word grief, not everyone, but I think you often associate it with loss, an actual physical loss of a person or a relationship, but it also can be a loss of the path you were going on, or the direction, or the answers that came to you. That can be a loss as well. So to recognize that there is grief in all of this. So how do you help your clients redefine spirituality for themselves if they no longer align with a belief system? Let's say maybe they don't no longer align, but maybe it's just different. Maybe their relationship with their spirituality or religion is different. How do you help clients when they're navigating that?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think the first thing you have to do is you have to establish your God image. You have to establish like what type of God, what type of higher power, what type of spirituality do I want to be in relationship with? You have to identify some values around that. Do I want to be in relationship with a God or a higher power who is a punisher, who is judgmental, who is evil and wills bad will against me? Or do I want to be in relationship with a God or a higher power who is unconditionally loving and merciful and forgiving and patient? I think that really forms the foundation from which you can go, and then, that's where you can go and decide what boxes do you want to be ticking. What boxes are you okay maybe leaving unticked there? But it starts with, you have to know what you're being in relationship with. You have to almost contract with yourself. What kind of relationship are you getting into?
And that's so interesting. I wonder how many people don't even go there, right? Like, what is the relationship? Like, what is the God image, as you said it? Like, what do I feel like my relationship is there, and what defines that, and what do I want that to look like, right? So what are some practical steps or exercises you recommend to clients when they're exploring spirituality, like in a way that feels authentic? Because sometimes, again, it's like, well, it's not this prescribed way that the church has done in the past. What are ways that feels authentically, like that people can do that in an authentic way?
So the first thing I want to preface is I want to invite practically all of our listeners to maybe consider adopting the notion that you're already spiritual. Too often religion and like modern religion it comes from this angle of, we are humans trying to become spiritual. We are trying to attain to this great spirituality. This is something that we don't have and we're trying to obtain. When in fact, I think it's already inside of us. The question is, how do we become more human? We are already inherently spiritual and have that spiritual capacity. And so once you've established that, once you are comfortable with the fact that I'm already spiritual as it is, I want to invite you to consider exercising some curiosity towards what is appealing to you. I encourage people to look back on what interests them as a child, what drew them to wonder, what sparks awe in the heart, what sparks excitement in the soul from those really young years. Those are some really rooted places that you can go to, and just being curious about those practices. Maybe, at least in my own story, I went to college. I lived a very college experience. I didn't grow up in a super faithful home. I'm very lukewarm, non-denominational Christian. And I went to college. I lived the fraternity lifestyle and all the in-between. And I was super just out of it, just not feeling that. It was causing me a lot of mental health problems. And so I decided to convert to Catholicism. And Catholicism gave me a template. It gave me hope. It gave me, here's a black and white set of rules and morals from which to live your life. And if you live in between these rules, if you tick these boxes, you'll be good. God will love you. You'll be accepted. And that felt great for where I was, because I was so lost. So I went from one end of the pendulum, from, fraternity lifestyle, and total freedom, no morals practically, all the way to the other end of, okay, here we are at traditional Catholicism. And now, having since kind of looked back and reconstructed a lot of my relationship with God, I've kind of come back to the middle there a little bit. And my spirituality now, as an adult, feels much more aligned with how I felt towards God when I was a kid, before I even knew about Catholicism, before I even was given that paper with okay, here's how to live your life within the standards and teachings of the church. So it's been it's been an interesting swing of the pendulum, but I feel much more aligned with my inner child now. So and that's a curious place.
Yeah. When you say that, what does that look like for you? Can you give us some examples? Okay, it's much more aligned with the way that you felt about God as a child. What is that like for you?
Yeah, well, I didn't read the Bible growing up as a kid. I didn't go to church that often, but I did know that there was something else out there. There had to be. I had these experiences with my family, my grandmother in particular, that just really sparked awe and wonder about the world and about relationships with people. My grandma had told me some stories about near-death experiences that some of, I think my great-grandparents had. And those just really stood out to me as how in the heck is that even possible? And it's those things that you hear that just give you chills, They send that shot of kind of like life up your back, and up your spine. And that just really sparked my wonder and my awe. Is like, there's got to be something more to this. Like, there's definitely something out there that's above me, that is looking out for me, that's there for us. And so I prayed to that God, to that higher power as a kid. And so I didn't really have anything in particular that I was like coming from, but it just felt right. Like, it felt natural, and it just felt like it was just within me. It was already there. And just following that little trailhead, it's just what felt natural to me.
It's interesting. It doesn't even sound like it was that like mind blowing. It was like, actually, it was just natural. It was an easy, because that's actually where you were kind of coming home to what you already knew initially.
Correct.
Like, it was what felt right to you as a child before you went, one way and then went the other extreme. And it was actually probably where home was for you with your higher power anyways. That makes a lot of sense. So in this question, they are talking about also the family dynamics that can be really tricky when it comes to navigating faith. How would you encourage this listener to navigate conversations about their faith transition or their exploration, right? With family members who often feel hurt or scared, or, you talked about that empty seat in heaven, that they might feel that way. What does that look like, and how do they navigate that in a respectful way that honors their own experience, but honors what's going on for the family member as well?
And I just want to honor the fact that that's such a difficult place to be. Like, that's never something that I've like personally had to experience to that degree, or I'm at that much, tension and pain with family. So I just want to say that I really honor that, and I really see the pain that people are in if they're in that position, and that's not easy. What I tell my clients is, everybody has a right to ask for what they need. They have a right to set boundaries. And now the people they're asking also have a right to decide whether or not they meet those needs or they respect those boundaries, but you have a responsibility to create safety for yourself. And so it's a simple conversation on boundaries. And this can be really hard for a lot of family dynamics, especially kind of dealing with these things. But I want to invite our listeners to think about what boundaries or what conversations are going to be okay for you. I know right now we've got the holidays coming up. There's going to be a lot of tension and awkwardness and difficulty there. But what are those things that you would need from your family to make you feel more comfortable in that space with them? And so if that's just saying like, hey, we're not talking about going to church, or hey, I'll come over for Christmas dinner, but I'm not going to go to like Christmas Eve Mass, or I'm not going to go to church with you on Christmas Day, but I'm happy to come over and be a part of the family. And depending on how the family reacts to something like that, then you have a responsibility to determine what you're going to do with that. If they're not going to respect that, and they're going to say, no, you can't come over unless you go to church with us, then that's going to really hurt. That's going to be really difficult. But maybe the best move for you is to hold tight to your boundaries and to stay in that safe space that you've created. And maybe that means not going over for Christmas. So there's going to be
so hard.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult, but it goes back to this. This is just, it's tough. It's tough, but you have to stick to those boundaries for yourself.
Yeah. Honoring those boundaries. And again, boundaries can be so difficult to maintain and withhold because they're uncomfortable. Right? But getting clear about those, even, as you're talking, I'm thinking that sounds more like playing offense than defense. Like, okay, I kind of have a game plan in my mind. This is what I'm going to go in knowing that I'm not going to have these conversations, that this is what I will and won't do when it comes to attending church or involvement in religious discussions, that this is what feels right to me at this point. And you reserve the right that can change too. Like right now, this is where I'm at, but right now, this is what feels good and feels supportive to me. So I think that's a really important thing to remember. Also, how do we honor ourselves, but have compassion with people that are around us that are honestly probably coming from a place of love? They're probably coming from a place of potential fear as well. What does that look like?
Yeah, you're spot on, Lindsay. I mean, all of this concern, all of the unintentional shaming coming from the family it's done in goodwill.
Yeah.
Shame and that the pressure maybe, or the invitations to church, it's coming out of a place of care. These people want to literally spend eternity with you. That's a good thing at the end of the day. Like I love that somebody would be looking out for my eternal well-being. I mean, that's amazing that they care so much to invite me, that they care so much to push me, maybe in the ways that they're pushing me there. However, the thing with shame is it's always unintentionally bestowed. It's always it's done with good intention behind it. It's done in goodwill. And that's what's so cloak and dagger about it. But I think just honoring the fact that, hey, like, I see that you care about me. Like, thank you for caring about me, but this is something I've got to work through for myself right now. I'm not saying I won't ever come back right now, but I just need to take some space. But thank you for seeing me and for caring so deeply about the family, for caring about my well-being, for caring about my salvation. And that in and of itself comes from a place of love. And that has to be honored and respected too. In the same way that the person who is maybe taking that step back can be honored and respected for asking the questions, or for just processing what is a very human and normal thing to be processing.
Yes. As you're saying that, it makes me think two things can be true. You can hold a boundary and you can say, this is what feels comfortable for me and where I'm at right now. And you can also hold space for a person that is possibly mourning, or that is feeling fearful, and that is coming from a place of love. That both of those things, I can hold space for both of those things at the same time. It's not one or the other. And I think sitting in that place of like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It's actually both can be probably affirming to both parties, like, and to see their good intention, right? Your good intention. Like, no one's trying to hurt anybody in this situation. Everyone's trying to do their best with, and I think when you look at it from that perspective, that's helpful.
Yeah. 100%, Lindsay. I mean, that's so valid. If you just come in with that attitude of like, everyone is trying to just do their best right now with a really difficult situation. Like, can we just start with that? It doesn't have to be some giant explosion and some like the family is divided. Okay, that's not happened yet. We don't have to go there. Let's just stay in the now. And the now is the fact that we all care and we love each other enough to talk about this. We love each other enough to be having these conversations. But something you said really stood out to me there. This one or the other kind of dynamic, and something that's been really big for me in my spiritual growth. And where a lot of people can find difficulty and get caught up in a faith transition is they're making the jump from what's called dualistic thought. So dualistic thought, just real briefly, is this polarity thinking. It's one or the other. It's right versus left. It's LDS versus Catholic, who has the truer of the two faiths. It's Republican versus Democrat. A dualistic person will categorize things. It will sort things. It will put things into a hierarchy as better or worse. Dualistic thinking is easily offended. It's anxious. It's insecure. And most people almost always feel unsafe and antagonized around people who are stuck in this dualistic line of thinking. And what's interesting here is institutionalized religion, like, automatically promotes dualistic thinking. We have the fullness of the faith. Here's your moral template. Here's the boxes to tick. Here's the way to think. The thing that's difficult is church and religion often teaches us what to believe and what to think, rather than teaching us how to believe and how to think. And so you get caught up in this place where you're jumping from dualistic thinking, to non-dual thinking. And non-dual thinking is much more inclusive. It's much more comfortable in the gray area, because once you start asking questions about your faith, or maybe you find that you disagree with a certain teaching, that rule no longer applies. There's now some gray area here. What are you going to do with that gray area? So non-dualism is it sees things in whole. It's not one or the other. It's, rather than Catholic or Protestant, it sees children of God that are trying to be in a relationship with God. They love God and they care, rather than these persons have the fullness of the faith, whatever. Rather than Republicans versus Democrats, they see people that care about the future of the United States, that want the best for everybody.
Boy, that feels so much more, I don't know, that like feels like soothing to the soul. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It actually can be that ultimately, at the end of the day, often we have the same intention, but our mode of getting there is different, right? The vehicle we've chosen is a different vehicle, but at the end of the day, this is ultimately who I am, and we can see a common humanity in that. It's not just me versus you. It's actually there's humanity in the fact that we are on this we're having this experience together. The vehicle I choose to get there is might be a little different than your vehicle, but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's different. And that feels human. That feels connecting. I love that idea.
Yeah. Well, it's universal. The human experience is a universal experience that we all have. It's not divided by faith. It's not divided by religion. We're all human at the end of the day, and we all struggle with whatever we struggle with. Yep. And what's interesting too is the word peace. And speaking personally, I have never, ever once in my life met a dualistic thinker who is truly at their deepest root, truly at peace. But everyone I've met who makes that jump into non-dualistic thought and is more comfortable in the gray area, they have a peace about them. They just do. And it's kind of, I can't really put words to it, but it's just one of those lived, again, universal human experiences. You know those people in your life that you've interacted with or been in a relationship with that just feel grounded. They just feel rooted. They emit so much self energy. You can tell that they're in line with their true self. And that's something that we can't always put like a template to. We can't, look at them and think, oh, they've ticked all these boxes. They just emit that. They're just present in that.
That makes sense. That willingness to sit in the gray, the willingness to maybe have some unknowns. What you said earlier that I think is so important is the difference of what to think versus how to think. And it makes me think of Fowler's stages of faith, and we won't have time to go into that, but that he talked about that it's actually not a bad thing to be questioning and wondering and transitioning and like it actually can be a deepening of faith. It doesn't mean